Madam Chair, you're live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting of the Charter Review Commission of May 8, 2023 to order. And it is now 1:04 p.m. and we are meeting virtually for this, our last meeting. Elizabeth, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Dixon,
Present.
Commissioner Blundis,
Present.
Commissioner Deardack,
Here.
Commissioner Granillo, Commissioner Ives,
Here.
Commissioner Montoya,
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Present.
Commissioner Pettis,
Here.
Chair Long.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Ortiz. Was that the second? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll ask Elizabeth to take a roll call vote on this.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Blundis,
Yes.
Commissioner Deardack,
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Ives,
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pettis,
Yes.
Chair Long.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Our next item for discussion and action is consideration of a recommendation from the Subcommittee on Human Rights and Social Issues for a charter amendment, creating a new section 10.01 of the charter, providing further requirements and details for future city charter commissions. And as you all will recall, I will note that Commissioner Granillo has joined us, and welcome.
Thank you.
At our last meeting, where we voted on all of the recommendations, this item did not make it onto the agenda. And so, although we discussed it previously, and we know it was a matter that was referred to that subcommittee, we did not have a chance to vote on it because it wasn't on the agenda. So we have included it in the report in the event that there is a positive vote out of this committee to include it, but it is an item that is in the report and that you all have seen before. And I will ask Commissioner Ives if he would like to elaborate on this recommendation.
I suppose I'll be brief because it will be repetitive based upon past statements during our meetings. We've all perceived that the process itself had certain drawbacks, not enough time, not enough public-facing outreach, not enough ways to encourage participation. And so this was an effort to try and ensure that there was adequate time for any ensuing commission to do the work that it needs to do, both in terms of substantive consideration of the matters that are brought before it, but also to establish some procedural, if you will, rules in terms of timing and the like that will ensure it has opportunity to do more outreach and get more public input. So let me stop there because I don't think much more need be said unless there are questions.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Ives? All right. Is there a motion to recommend this as a charter amendment, amending section 10.01 regarding charter commission, future charter commissions, and filling out the current section 10.01 with those requirements? Would anyone like
Motion to move.
Okay, it has been moved by Commissioner Pettis to adopt this as as a charter recommendation amendment and seconded by Commissioner Granillo. Okay, is there any discussion of this item as a recommended charter amendment? As I said, we all have discussed this and seen it before. So I will ask Elizabeth to take a roll call vote on this motion.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Blondis. Commissioner Blondis,
Yes.
Commissioner Deardack,
Yes.
excuse me, Commissioner Granillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Ives,
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Montoya,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pettis,
Yes.
Chair Long,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Our next item is approval of the Charter Commission's report to the governing body. We circulated the proposed report. Pat and Marcos were working hard on that on Thursday and all Friday afternoon. We're trying to get this in shape to be able to get it to you for this meeting, as well as to the city council. So I know there wasn't a lot of time to review it, but please let us know if you would like, if you see any revisions that you would like to recommend, anything else that you would like to suggest regarding the report. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of clarifying questions, and then just a comment. Number one, I think it looks good. It does reflect what we discussed last week, but I just want to make sure that we have it in the form that it's totally accurate. In terms of page 1, the second paragraph, which is pretty much summarizing what we're sending to the city council, I want to make sure that we have those numbers correct. That's summarizing the number of recommendations. We had a total of 15 recommendations, and I do have a clarifying question on one. The open meetings recommendation. As I read what we have in here, I wasn't sure if it indicated that we wanted it to be a charter commission change, addition, because what we say for open meetings, we say the governing body should consider this as a potential legislative change. Are we sending this to the council for inclusion as part of the charter? Or are we just making a recommendation for the council to look at this based on future legislation? And that is important to know, what our purpose is, because it's going to affect the numbers on that in that second paragraph on page 1 in terms of whether it's just a recommendation or if it's a charter inclusion. And it was my understanding that we were sending this as part of charter commission changes to the council for them to deal with and address based on whether all the boards and commissions should comply with open meetings. We're saying yes, they should, but we're leaving the details to the council. And I'm not sure that recommendation on page 21 that says the governing body should consider this as a potential legislative change sends that message. And maybe I misunderstood. So that's one clarifying question if anyone wants to jump in and help me out.
Okay, yeah, my recollection of the vote was that it was a matter to be recommended for the council to review, as with the boards and commissions sunset, but it was not a charter amendment. That was what the vote was. And maybe the wording could be a little clearer on that recommendation is what I'm hearing, Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes, because I was trying to tally up to make sure that the tally of our 15 recommendations worked out in that paragraph on page 1. And I wasn't sure where to put this particular one, whether it was a charter amendment or if it was charter amendment language, or if it was recommendation for action, not in charter. or if it was recommendation for no action, because there's like 3 different groupings. And so I just wanted to make sure. So you're saying this is recommendation for action, but not in charter.
Yes, that's correct. That was the vote of the commission.
Okay, so having said that, I think there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 charter recommendations. If I'm counting them correctly, the paragraph says 6 amendments to the charter. And we don't have to figure that out now, Madam Chair. I'm just saying that needs to be clarified before you present to City Council on Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you for checking that. Commissioner.
Madam
Ortiz.
Chair, the city attorney has her hand up.
Yes, I did see that. I just wasn't quite done yet. I am counting 6, but let me ask Aaron to weigh in on that.
So my comment's not about the number, although I'm scrolling through and Pat might have the answer on that. It was just that the recommended legal position or legislative position is the current state. So I don't know if we want to characterize it as a change, but the current state of affairs is that boards and commissions of the city are required to follow the Open Meetings Act, except that we do allow for 100% virtual, which I think this recommends that be potentially an exception. So your recommendation does reflect the current state of affairs.
Yeah, I think it was, and I know you weren't at our last meeting, but the discussion was, governing body, why don't you look at what you're doing and try to make everything compliant with the Open Meetings Act, but if it really does increase participation and you have good reasons for having meetings virtually, then continue with what you're doing. I mean, it was that sort of, I think was the message, and maybe it could be worded a little bit differently. Let me ask Pat what she remembers.
Chair Long, thank you. I also count 6 as in the substantive changes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my recollection was that it was slightly different than the current way that we deal with Open Meetings Act, in that Commissioner Ives said that everything would comply with the Open Meetings Act unless it was easier for public participation virtually, which to my mind made it so that entirely virtual meetings on behalf of it being hard for the board members was not allowed.
Right. So our current state is there has to be a vote that's in the best interest of the public. So it sounds like it's being slightly modified, that it has to be in the public, better for the public rather than just in the interest of the public, something like that.
So Madam Chair,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Elizabeth. I have listened to the to the meeting on YouTube, and what Pat said is what was said.
Okay.
The motion was to continue with the current state of affairs as Ms. McSherry said, with the exception of having a virtual meeting if it was easier to get public comment.
Okay. Well, I think that's what this says then. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
So I just to double check, triple check, we're not asking the city councilors to include this in the charter for review.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
correct.
you. Thank you. So that was one of the issues, Madam Chair. The other issue, and I almost am reluctant to bring it up because it seems to keep coming up, is is language in the red line version on page 3 that is not in the final version that we're actually approving today, and it has to deal with the Finance Committee. There's a on page 3 there on the red line version. There's a clarification that says the City Council shall select from among the members a Finance Committee, and may select from among its members either other committees to facilitate its work. And I know there was lots of conversation on this, and I think bottom line at the very end of all of our deliberations, the idea was to maintain and keep the language regarding Finance Committee within the charter so that it clarifies that there is one, and then this particular section I just read on page 3 that's been struck out, it clarifies who, how the composition shall be selected. Anyway, I just thought that that should be in the main version, and that's the only other comment I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your time in reviewing those. So as I understand it, maybe this is for Aaron. The city council will receive what we're calling the clean final report with whatever changes we make today as approved. And in terms of a black line or red line report from comparing these revisions to the current charter, we're not presenting that. And it could be something that the council can request of the city attorney's office when they're analyzing our recommendations, but we're not presenting that at this time. Does that make sense?
Chair Long, I'll defer to Pat on clarifying this. I think what I'm hearing the comment say is that there's maybe just a mismatch in the text rather than so it sounds like there, and I'll defer to Pat on that.
Yeah, and I know Paul worked on that too. So let me go to Commissioner Deerdack first, Pat. And this is specific to the Finance Committee, is that correct?
Yes, it is. And in fact, the sequence has been that we were generating red line versions until they became so difficult to decipher that we stopped doing that. And then we made changes going forward in a clean copy. Then when the interest was to include a red line version as a tool, as you said, Chair Long, a tool for the council's use going forward, we had to go back to an obsolete red line version that still existed and try to bring it up to speed. And this particular deletion of 3 words we kept stumbling over it because it is our clear intention, and the way we voted as a whole was that those 3 words be included. But the red line version is an antique among us, and it keeps popping up as having been deleted. That deletion is an error.
Okay, so it was something from your report then from the
Right.
subcommittee. It was not a comparison of the recommendations to the current city charter.
That's right.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be helpful to anyone at this point. It was helpful going through it and getting to the final recommendations, but not helpful at this point. Okay, let me ask Pat to weigh in on this.
So I'm clear, this is not in the final report, and it is not supposed to be in the final report, correct? That sentence? The city council shall select from among its members a finance committee and may select from among its members other committees to facilitate its work. I don't see it in the final.
That sentence should not be in the final, but the reference within the duties of the city manager to refer the budget to the finance committee and the full council. The reference to the finance committee should be in that sentence under the manager.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
It is my understanding that it should be in the final report because the sentence we're speaking of clarifies how that finance committee is going to be put together. And so there should be 2 places in our final report that reference the finance committee. Number 1, the budget going there, and then the sentence I just read on page 3 that's redlined out. And it was a long time in discussing all of this and lots of different versions. So I can see the confusion, but it was my understanding that we wanted to focus and elevate the issue of a budgeting process, a finance portion in the charter, and the finance language in the charter, coupled with a existing finance committee that is already existing as part of the charter. That coupled with the new language on finance and budgeting will strengthen and make our charter stronger and focus and raise the priority and the need for good financial management on all levels. So at leaving the language in the charter that talks about a finance committee needs to remain, but this additional sentence that was crafted by us that was taken out really adds to that level, because what it does is specifies who shall create the finance committee. It says the council shall select, so it further gives responsibility and direction. The council shall select from among its members a finance committee and may select from among its members other committees to facilitate. This further identifies and clarifies, not only is there finance committee, it's the council that's putting it together. The responsibility is placed there, and it's clear that it shouldn't fall to the wayside and should always happen, because the duties are outlined in the charter. There exists one. These are the people that create it, and this is how they can create it. So I believe it. All in my conversations is always my intent to leave that in there.
Okay. I see that, and that's a helpful explanation. So there's really the finance committee gets appointed by the council under your subcommittees, what you're remembering your subcommittee's recommendation was. And there's also a reference in the section under the city manager that the city manager would work to prepare a timely budget for review and approval by the finance committee. So those are the two places that you're talking about. Okay. Let me ask Commissioner Deerdak, does that comport with what you're remembering as the recommendation, or does that seem agreeable?
Entirely agreeable. It's simple. The short answer to your question is entirely agreeable on all counts.
Okay.
How's that?
All right, so we will add that into the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We did vote on the recommendation, but I think this was in the recommendation. It's just, as you said, there have been a lot of edits going back and forth over the months, and it would be easy to see how this one did not make it into the report. Commissioner Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the practice at the city has been to allow the mayor to designate which councilors sit on which committees, and also, I believe, to appoint chairs for those committees. That would seem to be a change to that. So I'm just wondering, do we need to change anything else in the charter so that is not in conflict with any other provision? And that may have been done, and I just haven't focused on that, but wanted to ask the question.
Okay, that's a good question. Let me go to Pat.
Aaron is probably able to answer that question. I would like for you to restate what the changes you want are, so that we can make sure that we have them to make them.
Are you asking for what changes I'm proposing?
No, that
Okay.
previous discussion with Commissioner.
And Pat, what it is it was in the red line that you prepared shown, I mean, the black line shown as a strikeout, and it says.
Right, and that doesn't exist. It shouldn't be a strikeout. It should just not be there. But was there something else?
That's right. No.
Okay.
That was it. Because the other place that finance committee appears is under city managers duties. Right. It's still there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me go to Aaron now.
So Chair Long, members of the committee, I guess, so on clarifying Pat's clarification, we are adding in that language that was stricken out right back from the, okay.
That's correct.
My clarification, and it was, I hesitated to raise this, but now that Commissioner Ives has raised it, yes, the duties of the mayor do provide that he appoints with the consent of the council, the members of advisory commissions. Although commissions, I'm not sure. I thought it was committees and commissions, but so generally that's been interpreted that anything that's advisory in the city that the mayor appoints to, unless there's something in the charter that deviates from that. So the finance committee is an advisory committee, at least right now. They don't have any decision-making authority. So there is potentially a conflict there where we'd probably want to create a caveat if finance committee is still advisory.
Right, so under the mayor's duties, it's appoint with the consent of majority of the total possible membership of city council, the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and members of advisory commissions. And the finance committee would fall under that, you think, as an advisory commission?
Currently, it's defined in ordinance and it is advisory, yes.
Okay,
Chair Long, if I may interject.
please.
I don't. If someone wanted to make the case that there's a conflict, they probably could find an argument. But if, on the other hand, we didn't want there to be an argument over this, I don't see why we would have to have one. It has been the practice, as Commissioner I've said, and now the consent of the council is in the current procedure, right? When the mayor appoints. So the council weighs in on it anyway. What is there? I don't understand, Aaron, why why the text is self-contradictory necessarily.
So what I understand is that we are adding the words that say the city council shall select from among its members a finance committee and may select from among its members other committees to facilitate its work. However, there are many advisory committees that are made up of counselors, and they are not selected from among the members. They are appointed by the mayor with the consent of the council. And I don't think we'll really have a last in time argument so much because you're amending both sections at the same time. So it is a little bit, one's more specific. So I guess we would probably argue that it would be the ones that are more specific that would govern in a statutory construction. I mean, it's easier if we don't have to go into statutory construction as the plan rather than like we'd prefer not to have a plan about how we're going to future interpret our laws in order to avoid a conflict. It'd be nice to avoid them from the get-go. So that would absolutely be my advice to the governing body, is that if they take this recommendation, that they create language that's consistent throughout. It is entirely up to this board whether you want to do so now.
Yeah, I guess where you can count me as having stumbled is that I am not as privy to ordinances as as some of you are. And I would not have seen this. Are you asking us to create a cure for this possible contradiction here today? Is that what you're asking, Aaron?
Chair Long, Councillor Deerdeck, I believe Commissioner Deerdeck, I believe Commissioner Ives is the one asking about this, not me.
Yeah.
Not I am not asking anyone to do anything.
Fair enough.
But I think what I heard you say, Aaron, was that if the council were to take up the commission on this recommendation for a charter amendment, that there could be further work done to make sure it's clear going forward before it goes to the voters as to so that there isn't a conflict about commissions, committees, who's appointing, that sort of thing.
Chair Long, I'm absolutely saying that if this commission has a preference, however, because they could go either way with that. They could say this is an exception to the rule, or they could say they don't like the conflict and they want to go the other way. So if there is a preference of the board, that's helpful to state now so that we'll know what that is. If there's not, then certainly that would be my recommendation, is they do clarify that before it goes to the voters.
And Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, just follow up on that question.
Pulled up the existing charter on my screen as we've been talking, and we're looking at section 501E. And I think if you put a comma at the end of that section and just said, with the exception of the Finance Committee, and possibly a reference to the change that is being proposed by this commission, you've solved that problem. But
I was thinking that too. We
Madam
could
Chair, I thought
carve
we
out the finance committee. Yes, Pat?
thought that wasn't the recommendation anymore. I thought that was crossed out in the red line and should be removed entirely. Did I misunderstand that?
We intended the opposite, Pat.
Okay, so it's not in the report, but should be in the report.
Correct.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm,
Madam Chair.
That's right. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate what Commissioner Ives suggested. I think that could take care of the question. Not that I'm convinced should be a question. From my perspective, the commission is sending forward to the counselors the elevation and the focus on finance committee budgeting, and we are recommending something different, which may break from past practices. It was not our intent, and I think this issue could come up in other areas. It was not our intent to make sure there were no obstacles and everything in the current charter with our recommendations read perfectly and there was no conflicts. That can arise, as well as what we recommend to the council could be changed by the council, would create even more conflicts or discrepancies or areas where it just doesn't work well. So in my view, we're raising the issue that we want this to be looked at and developed by the council, the city council, and the finance committee is still there. And whether or not it creates conflicts is not an issue initially. The city council still has to look at the concept. They may not like the concept and it's a done deal. And we would have spent all this time trying to rearrange and try to avoid any conflicts in the current charter as well as these issues. I think this is the first screen. We're sending them our concept. This is what we want them to do. We want them to consider the city council's appointing. We want them to consider maintaining and keeping the finance council there and to add the budgeting language. And if they agree to that, then that's when we go to the second level of screening, and this is rolling up the sleeves and getting it. Okay, let's make sure it works with existing charter. Let's make sure there's no legal issues regarding the state statutes. So I think we're trying to get ahead of ourselves and accomplish everything in one recommendation. And I think it's not necessary at this point. It needs to be done. I agree, but I don't believe we need to do it today. In my estimation, if we send forward what our wishes are, the city council is going to look at that and they're going to have adjustments and changes anyway to whatever we represent. So I believe as long as we add page 3, item D from the red line version to the current clean version and send it forward, I think the city council will understand our intent and then do with it what they may. So, but I do appreciate Commissioner Ives' suggestion in adding those couple of words to it, if that helps clarify. So that's all.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to Commissioner Pettis, who's had her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And just really briefly, I agree with what Commissioner Ortiz was just saying, and I think that the clearer document we can send to the council, the better, right? Like if we can address some of the discrepancies right now, right here, that would be great. We are not going to be able to do that with every cross-reference, but as much as we're able to, I would suggest that we try to do that today. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Montoya?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to echo. To the extent, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Ortiz, we can't possibly find everyone, but when we have found one and we know about them, to the extent we can, make that clear in our report, the better. I appreciate Commissioner Ives' suggested language, and I would be fine with that, or even something more broadly to say, yes, in section 501E, these are this is how it is done for commissions, which we don't need to get into that, but with the exception of finance committee or unless otherwise described here in the charter. This way it's broad. If it's something else, another committee or another commission that is going to be an exception to that rule, there's that flexibility. But since we don't have that this year, I think, or this decade, I think Commissioner Ives' recommendation is perfect. And then we've seen the problem, we know about it, and we've made a recommended solution, and they can modify it however they want.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so far on the report, I'm hearing that from the black line report on page 3, the strikeout, which is 501D, is coming back in, and that says the city council, and we'll vote in the end here, but the city council shall select from among its members a finance committee and may select from among its members other committees to facilitate its work. And then Commissioner Ives, you suggested, it sounds like an amendment to 502, the executive branch, the mayor E. At
Yes,
the end of that paragraph about appointments of members of advisory commissions, what language are you suggesting?
well, the only carve out that has been proposed is for the finance committee. And
Okay.
simply to say, with the exception of the finance committee, and if you wanted to cite to the other portion where the amendment would potentially appear, that would certainly make clear the change in the instance. And I do have a follow-up question.
Okay, go ahead.
So an issue that came up early on as we were considering the budget measures was a change to the existing charter, and specifically the duty of the mayor, which included 5.01 subsection M, work with city, this was the mayor shall work with city personnel and timely prepare an annual budget and proposed spending priority for review and approval by the finance committee and the governing body. And I'm wondering, given the restructuring I see under the mayor's powers and duties, the M that's in there currently says represent the city in governmental relations. So we had talked about removing that section, but if the red line is supposed to reflect those changes or changes to the existing charter, that change per se from the old subsection M under the mayor's duties, unless it appears elsewhere, doesn't appear to be in the redlined version.
You are correct, Commissioner, because what we're hearing from Commissioner Deerdak as the head of that subcommittee, really these red lines are not representative of a red line from the current charter. So it's not very useful at this point. Eventually, if the council wants it, there will be a red line from current city charter, which I think would be the most useful, of course. And that would be shown as a strikeout then, because it's been removed. Okay, let me ask Erin for her comment.
Sure, and mine's related to the removing ambiguity potentially. I do think if you want to remove it in relation to the mayor's appointment authority, you probably want to say something like unless otherwise provided in the charter, because you also have the charter commission recommendation in here that also is not appointments by the mayor, and then anyone else that's created by the commission or by the council itself, which is also permitted in that language we're adding back. So probably the broader language would be helpful.
Unless otherwise provided in the charter? No, I can't find it.
Yes, yeah, something like that, instead of just the finance committee. Yeah.
I think that does make sense.
That sounds good. You need a motion, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to make one, but you may not. That is a better.
We can certainly vote on these amendments to the report, or revisions, I should say, not amendments. So can we hear the language then? Maybe Erin has it.
Madam Chair, you have a motion from Commissioner Ortiz, so you need a second before you discuss it.
Commissioner Ortiz, what's your motion? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
I actually said if you would like a motion, I'd be happy to make one, and I would make a motion.
There's no
Basically,
motion yet, Elizabeth.
Oh, well, it sounded like
She's ready. She's ready to make one.
she made a motion.
Ask Erin what
Yeah,
she recommends. let's see what we had with the Commissioner Ives had said. At the end of that E, we're talking about 502E with the exception of the Finance Committee, but maybe we would just say except as otherwise described.
Right, so we've got a point with the consent of a majority of the total possible membership of city council, the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and members of advisory commissions. And so the new language would be after advisory commissions.
Yes.
And say something like except as provided other in this charter, so except as otherwise provided in the charter.
Okay, I like that.
My motion, Madam Chair.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Ives. Is there any discussion on that motion to include the phrase except as otherwise provided in the charter at the end of E?
Madam
Yes.
Chair, are you also adding the comma and say with the exception of finance? Okay.
No.
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 Oh, no. Okay.
No, it just is with except as otherwise provided
Okay.
in the charter.
Okay. Got it.
Do we say city charter or charter? Charter. Now we're getting down into it where we don't need to be. Okay. Any discussion, any further discussion? Let's take a vote on the motion. Elizabeth?
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Blondus,
Yes.
Commissioner Deardack,
Yes.
Commissioner Granillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Ives,
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pettis,
Yes.
Chair Long,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. Why don't we have another motion for clarification. Commissioner Ortiz, maybe you want to make this one. That we include in the report, it is not there, but the reference to on page 3 of the black line, that's item D. The city council shall select from among its members a finance committee and may select from among its members other committees to facilitate its work. Do we have a motion to include
So
that?
moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, and that is a motion by Commissioner Ortiz. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a second to the motion. All right, is there any discussion of that? Including that item in the report. We've had some discussion earlier. I think it was well discussed. So let's take a vote on that motion.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Blondus,
Yes.
Commissioner Deardack,
Yes.
Commissioner Granillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Ives,
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pettis,
Yes.
Chair Long,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for that clarifying discussion and the motions. Are there any other revisions that anyone would like to suggest to the report? Yes, Pat.
I believe there was a footnote that we wanted to take out. I'm not-
Yes, any footnote referring to the city manager preparing a red line to the current city charter, I think doesn't need to be in the report. Something the city council can request, the governing body can request if they want it.
That is on page 2. So the footnote on page 2.
Okay.
Okay,
And Chair Long and Pat, I think the first part of the footnote's fine. It's just given that this report's from the Charter Commission, the second sentence is more a prediction of the future about my office. So I would like to take that out. I don't know if it requires a vote because it's not really part of the report anyway.
Yeah, I would just recommend we take the whole thing out, and it's something that can be discussed verbally. If that's okay.
Absolutely.
The other thing I was going to recommend, and looking at this, and again, we throwing this together very quickly, but on page 1, the second paragraph, we say there's 6 substantive amendments, and I think we have verified that there are. And then we say there is also a section with 4 recommendations for governing body consideration, but not as charter amendments. And lastly, there is a section of 5 proposals that were considered but not recommended as changes to the charter. I agree that that's kind of confusing with the sentences right before it. So maybe we could say something like, lastly, there is a section with 5 proposals that were considered but not recommended as changes to the charter, nor as recommendations for governing body consideration. Something like that. So we can say it's neither one. It's not charter amendments, and it's nothing we want you to look at either.
Absolutely. That's very helpful. And since this is a letter from you, can we all do this by common consent?
Well, yeah, I think we can, when we have a motion to approve the report, if we can
Sure.
include in that any non-substantive
Right.
revisions that make it clear that can be made by the chair in that motion, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because they really don't go to the core of the report.
Correct.
Good job, Madam Chair.
There was a lot of people working on this. The city attorney's office, so thanks to everyone. Okay, is there a motion then? To approve
Madam Chair,
the report? Yes.
I move we approve the report as presented with the changes made today. And I want to thank the staff as well as you, Madam Chair, for your leadership in getting us to this point. I move for approval.
Madam Chair, what can the motion say? Approve the report as amended?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That's what I said.
Well, you didn't
Yes.
use the word amended. I just didn't
I'm
want to change
teasing,
the
I'm
wording.
teasing, Madam Chair. I'm teasing. That's what I meant.
Second.
Okay. Is there a second, Commissioner Ives?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's take a roll call on it.
Okay. Commissioner Dixon,
I also want to commend all of you on the hard work. I cannot believe how incredible it is and the time it took to get to this point. I wish I could have joined you for more of that process.
Thank
your
you.
vote, Commissioner Dixon,
Yes, sorry.
Commissioner Blundis,
Yes.
Commissioner Deerdeck,
With pleasure. Yes.
Commissioner Granillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Ives.
Yes, and also with many thanks to all.
Commissioner Montoya,
Yes. And also
Commissioner-
many thanks to all.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes, also with pleasure. And thank you all.
Commissioner Pettis,
Yes, and also with pleasure and gratitude.
Chair Long,
Yes.
motion passes.
Yay. Okay. Motion passes. The last action. All right, are there any matters from staff?
Thank you, Chair Long. I just want to thank my team for all their work last week while I was out. Really, I very much appreciate it, and all the work with the subcommittees throughout the process since November. Thank you very much. And it's been an interesting process, and I think we all learned a lot as well. So thank you all as the commissioners.
It's great. Okay, any matters from the committee? Any other matters? Yes, Commissioner Pettis.
Chair Long, I just wanted to thank you specifically for your graceful navigation of this process. It could have gone a number of ways, and here we are. Good job, team, and thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you for that. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for your hard work and really dedication to the citizens of Santa Fe, because I think that was preeminent in all the work that you did throughout this process. I've enjoyed making some new acquaintances and working with some old friends. And I think we can all be very proud of the work that we did, our process, and it has really been a pleasure. And I do want to specifically thank the City Attorney's Office, their work with the subcommittees, their support all along the way. You know, you really kept us going through this last 7 months as if you didn't have enough to do. And you were always there. So we really, all of us, thank you for that. And Marcy, thank you for jumping in midstream and always being very cheerful about helping us. And we appreciate your help all the way through to the end. And I don't know that Jeff is here, but you know, you all didn't always see all the work that Jeff was doing, but there we were on a Friday afternoon. We've got to get the agenda out. And where's Jeff? Jeff is always there. And Jeff was there last Saturday with me making more changes to the report with some errors that were in there. And he's just amazing. So you all need to keep him. But he was always on the spot and available at any time and always so professional and positive. And that's what you need when things are going south. You need positive. So I want to thank you all. It has been really incredible experience, and I know it has been for you too. And as Aaron said, I think we've all learned a lot, and we'll see what comes of it. But I certainly enjoyed our work. Thank you very much. All right, next meeting, no meeting scheduled. And at this point, we will go on to the council. Just so you all know, we're presenting this report to the council. I am presenting it on Wednesday at 5. I have asked the 2 chairs of the subcommittees if they can be there as a resource. That will mean we won't have a quorum, so we won't have to notice a meeting, but in the event there are some detailed questions that only they would know, hopefully they can be there to jump up and answer a question. And we'll see what happens out of that. Yes, Commissioner Ice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had actually sent you an email indicating that I will be attending my nephew Jack Hickey's graduation from business school at the University of Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Which we fly out to tomorrow, and which is now happening on Wednesday. It had been scheduled for later, but the university determined that the building originally to house the graduation was apparently not fit for occupation. So they changed the venue to one and moved the date up several days. So I apologize. I will try and join via electronic means if possible, but yeah, I may not be there.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and we'll move along even in your absence. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair Long. I was just going to say that there are a recognition of St. Mike's varsity basketball team and a water update as the first 2 presentations. So it'll probably be a little bit after 5 if anyone's tuning in on YouTube to watch.
Okay, but we won't be there late, so that's nice. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
You.